Alright guys, so we've briefly covered the pre-garden era, we've briefly covered the fall, we've followed the Cain, the first murderer, from the plateau of Giza through to the Appalachian Mountains, the Vinca culture, Romania. We briefly covered the Wallachia spirit, the Wallachi spirit, and how he expanded and covered the whole world, meeting hands, leaving towns, bringing civilization, agriculture, farming. He leaves governments when he moves on with mayors in charge. This is my great granddad and my great nan. Regalia, guys. He also left behind in each town police, secret societies, and the other side of the same coin, mystery schools. It all goes hand in hand, guys. What we're talking about in the period and the time, what he's doing is he's forming all of this stuff. The round table, the empire. This is where the heraldry and everything comes from, guys. Because of course, Cain is the true story of Arthur, the half-dan, the bastard, Pendragon. Ben meaning son of, the dragon, Rex, king. He is King Arthur Pendragon, Arturus Rex, Ashur, Osir. Of course we know 7 kings there are. This is the 007. There's nothing, 7. So this is 7. 7 kings there are. And the 8th is one of the 7. So 107 vessel is 8. So 8 is 107. Okay, guys? Or at least the spirit of. See Arthur looking more vampy in this picture than others that paint him in a fairer light. See him over here as a young boy with the Hooty, Tahuti, Toph, Merlin, the Oath, Hermes Trismegistus, the Magi, Lucifer stood behind him, guiding him. All we need in this image, really, guys, is for these hands to be on his waist. Okay? He came a lot. The sword in the stone, guys. There is no stone. You're the stone. Or rather, in this case, the actual hand and rib vessel for the world king is the stone. And the sword in the stone is the Cum. Pakal's rocket. Okay? And of course, we know from Revelation, the beast you saw once was, now is not, yet will be, and will ascend from the pit. Well, Arthur is the once and future king, residing in the Isle of Avalon till his country needs him most. And this has gone on for centuries, guys, this story. It is really the story of Cain, Pendragon, the once and future Dark Lord. And here, guys, we'll see Lancelot. Now, this is not something I've made up. You might have noticed throughout the pandemic, this sort of imagery and all of the stuff like cherubs and being pushed because he did Lancelot. And now those people sadly have been biohacked. The once and future king, Arthur. The story of Cain. And we're going to pick up this story, guys, where we've left off. Some of you have been waiting 10 years since I've been saying about China and Nod and Cain. And I know I've promised, and I know I've tried to, but we're here, guys, okay? We're here. We're finally, after the story of the pre-garden world, after the story of the post-eviction events of the murder, after the wandering of the nomad, after setting up his townships and system that we are still carrying today, and after traversing the entire globe, bringing this system, we are finally going to talk about China. Now, the areas where I'm going to be focusing on, guys, are between the Yellow and the Yangtze River, from the coast right the way up to where we find the Denisova Cave. And the first place I want to start is Hemdu, and this is right on the coast, guys. Now, at Hemdu, we see round and square houses, guys. And amongst the square and round houses, we also find the first pyramidal type structures. Now, it seems that there's 3 of these in these villages and towns that they find, and usually it looks to me, from what I can make out, there's a town hall, a hall where all the villagers meet and talk. There's a religious centre or temple, and there's a palace, okay? A palace for the ruler or the chief of the area. The Hemdu Museum, at the entrance, we find this stone. It's man-made, guys. What I mean, sorry, it's modern. It's a modern thing that it's made, although it is in megalithic style. And we see this motif on it, which is an original motif, guys, found on this ivory, carved and being copied onto this gatepost. We can see, of course, it is the proto-winged disc, because we know now, some of us know anyway, that the Masons, it's in Egypt, but as it is in the Orient. So this stuff, the Masons, guys, is not Egyptian, despite popular belief. It's in Egypt, as it is in the Orient. And we can see the winged disc, guys, with the circumpunct in the fire, which is the arten. We can see the wings, which have feathers. And if you remember me about talking in the Vinca culture about the vases with the bird serpent vase, what looked like 2 serpent heads from the front, but round the side you could see that there were birds like emus or some long-necked bird. Well, that can be used symbolically, the crane head and neck, symbolically as the serpent, guys, and I'll show this as we go on. It is the serpent, the winged serpent carrying the arten, okay, guys? At Hemdu, they started reconstructing this village, township, and we find similar sort of buildings that we found in the Jomon culture, buildings on stilts. If we remember back to Catalhoyuk and the shrine layouts, and also the Vinca culture, with the houses with the totem and the bull head, just like at Catalhoyuk. And I said these containers, these square containers show up in the Vinca culture. Well, we compare the two with Jomon, and it's a continuation, guys. We can see the bull skull. It's never gone away, guys. Also, we can see in the worship building, we can see the totem of the silhouette of a person with the circumpunct and his arms raised, and he is phallic in nature, and it's ribbed for pleasure, guys. And this is, of course, on a step type pyramid staging area. As I said, guys, this here at Hemdu is the world's first pyramidal structures. This one, as we can see, is in the town hall kind of thing, guys, where they all meet, congregate round the fire. At Hemdu, we find progression of agriculture. They have things like ploughs, and they're forming sickles out of bladed stones in wood and antlers. Hemdu burials, guys, we find holes in the ground dug into the bedrock with a larger or another hole, in the hole, exactly like we find in the Mahdi culture of the Giza Plateau, pre-dynastic. It's the same thing, guys, at Hemdu. At Hemdu, we find burials in the fetal position, but also we find not the first containers, guys. We saw this before, I believe, in the Vinca culture. But we find the first straight burials, guys. And again, sometimes we find their pet dogs and foxes and vases, their containers or vessels, guys. But they're buried in a container, straight, at Hemdu, amongst the fetal position burials. At Hemdu, they've uncovered this pit, guys. There's a few of these, and the square with the trough and the two platforms and the hole in the ground, and they found these full of skulls. They are sacrificial pits full of animal parts and humans. There's loads of these pits, guys. Now if we go back, we can see the place of the sacrifice, the tepe. It's circular with the entrance between the two pillars. And then at the Mahdi culture, we found the square version of the entrance between the two pillars, guys. And then we found in the subterranean chamber, if you remember the layout, guys, the two platforms with the trough to the hole in the ground. And Hongshan, we saw all the same stuff, guys. Well, we find this at Hemdu, okay, guys? Rivers of blood. We also find at Hemdu a massive subterranean structure that instantly reminds me of Zaya al-Iran at Egypt, where we can find, well, guys, just compare if you know about this place. If not, look it up. We're not breaking down lots of stuff and focus it. We're just trying to generalize and make connections and join the dots, guys. But Zaya al-Iran, we find plenty of pottery, and this, guys, I want you to remember this shape and structure of a burial. I'm going to come back to this in other cultures, one in particular that you might already be thinking of after seeing this, but this guys, is Hemdu, China. The burials in Hemdu, not only are they buried in containers with their containers, this was all buried in a further outer container, like the Russian doll burials. And the governments are saying many of them are unusually tall and strong, but these are 7.5 footers, guys, 7 foot. 6'11" is not a giant, guys, not by a long shot, but these people were, for the time, unusually tall and strong. We also find mass burials where these guys are buried together, but they don't seem to be disrespected sacrifices as they're all buried with their vessels, the amphias, guys. So, Hemdu burials. We find at Hemdu the amphia in grey clay, guys, the corded pottery. But we also find the advancement from clay to ceramics. The first ceramics in the world, guys. Now, of course, somebody somehow taught them that to make ceramics, you would need to mix clay with silica, and you would need a furnace, guys. A primitive furnace. Now, I'd like to just point out, I use this guy, Primitive Technology. I like his videos. Go and check him out, guys. But somebody told these people, and I strongly believe it was the one who talked to angels, the traveller, the world king, how to make ceramics in a furnace by adding silica to the clay, guys. And I take this moment now we know that about furnaces. We're at the level of furnace. They pass their children through the fire to Moloch. And we find evidence of this, hard evidence, guys, all over the world. We find the dolmens megalithic, polygonal dolmens, and other types. I'd like to point out of a video, a clip, Sadesh walks around in India, at Hampi and these places, talking about these strange circular structures with holes in, but high up holes, no way to get inside. Sadesh can be seen saying. In Arabia, we find these massive polygonal structures. This one, that they're known as Cyclopean, guys. This is called the Tomb of Hille, and I believe, well, this is in Saudi Arabia, Hille. This is called Hille in India. Of course, guys, in Russia we find these dolmens with the pie symbol, guys. It's the fireplace, and we see the fireplace at Christmas, complete with the tree, and the pie symbol, the fire of Ra. Here's the fire of Ra. Here is the complete dolmen. And if you've now watched or remember the Wuhan military games, we see them passing their child through the fire, guys. That's what we know from scripture, passing their children through the fire to Moloch, and exactly the same thing can be seen in a relief at Hampi, guys. The polygonal furnace, and they're passing their children through the fire to Moloch, guys. We can compare this pottery, the Hemdu pottery, to the Madi culture pottery, guys. And on the Hemdu pottery, guys, we start to find these markings, like a cartouche, like a serek, identifying who this vessel belonged to. And we can see that there's 5 points, but there's 3 major points, guys, just like on the amulet from Catalhoyuk. And we can see the circular orb, the ball, in the crescent, guys, okay? Just like in the amulet from Catalhoyuk, guys, at Hemdu in China. We find the cups. We don't just have vessel amphias, we have smaller drinking vessels. Again, drinking vessels, guys. This is very interesting. It looks like the dotted hand that we found at the Altamara caves, reminding me of the puppet master. We find this cup, beaker, that's the word I was looking for, guys. The beaker from the beaker people, remember the beaker, guys, with this pig on. And we find these funny looking beakers which are called kongs, and I'll talk to you guys about these, in just one moment. We'll first mention the pig, the boar on the centre cup from Hemdu is the spotted boar with the circumpunct borehole, like we found at the Tepe and at Catalhoyuk, guys, in the Hemdu culture in China. And I'd just like to cover here, I missed out that this has the spider on it, which I believe is the rib vessel to the hands. So we clearly now, we're putting in concrete that this pillar is the vessel of the feathered serpent, the spotted boar. I believe this is the set animal, guys. The set animal, the spotted boar, the vessel of the feathered serpent. We find crystal, guys, worked crystal. This is the only cup glass of its type, but it's not a glass, it's a crystal. Amazing. We also find these seals, guys, and weapons. Again, exquisite blades, just like the seals from Catalhoyuk and the blades, guys. We move on to the Liangzhu culture. Liangzhu is a bit further inland between the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers. Now, the Liangzhu culture, guys, where they've discovered this, is now in marshlands, but in the antediluvian world, at the beginning of the antediluvian world, before the mingling of the seed and the Nephilim, this would have been so much different. They found a mound, guys, with a causeway to another mound, and I believe this is where they do sacrifices, and of course this reminds us of the old burial hill, the grotto, and of course the procession from the place of the murder, and now the sacrifice to the actual mound, the original old burial hill, guys. There's a map of the site at Liangzhu in the Liangzhu Museum, and they certainly have started building pyramidal structures, and we now find the remains of these. There's pictures of what they think this setup, building these would have looked like, and we can see how basically slave labour, maybe not slave labour, I believe slave labour, I don't know, but nobody built these, one or two men on their own, guys. This massive scale. Notice at Liangzhu, they portray or depict on top of the mound two areas, guys. This is a common reoccurring theme, image at the Liangzhu culture. I've included this here, but I'm just about to proceed to break this down a little further. On the jade, we can find this carving. Now, some of you might realise this is where I took the face of the mask when I compared it to Viracocha, when I did the video about the Viracocha, the sun god, on a Sumerian tablet, guys. Well, this is where I took the picture of the mask. We can see this is a mask complete with the mark, the cross mark, but it is a headdress of a much larger face with eyes and nose and a mouth. This contains another face with an eyes and nose and a mouth. And the hands coming round, can you see the fingers and the thumb, guys? Because this guy is stood behind this guy, controlling him. He's in possession of him. It's in his head. But the actual features of this are important, guys. It's very revealing. We'll move on. We find this on all sorts of jade artifacts, guys. The face with the other face above, and the face above has the ray feathered headdress. Is in his head. He is, of course, the bindi or the Buddha spot. This is crown chakra. He is in his third eye. Another representation of this, guys, just so you guys can take a good look. You can go back, compare these images, study them. In the Liangzhu culture, we find burials with possessions. We find these Kong things. We find these jade discs called Bai. We find axe heads, scepters, and we find jewellery, guys. Now to talk about the Kong. The Kong is made of jade. It's high quality workmanship, but we can notice, the first thing that we notice about this container or vessel is that they have squared the circle. Okay, guys? And on the side of this here, we see the Birdman. There are thousands of these jade Kongs, guys. On lots of them, the two-tiered ones, we see the man with the Birdman in his head. The squared circle. This is it, guys, okay? We're in China. All the stuff comes from China. The Kongs get taller, guys. And even smaller miniature versions can be found of real tall Kongs, okay? And they start to form pointed tips. And of course, I don't want to keep going forward in this short series, only refer to cultures backwards that we've seen, but you as well as I probably can't help but notice that this is strikingly resembles an obelisk, guys. Now the jade Bai are circular discs with holes in the middle. Now jade circumpuncts. We find them inscribed with these markings, okay, guys, which I believe are proto-cartouche, or rather seracs, guys. You see two here. This one has the familiar, that by now to us guys, the familiar symbol of the two between the insert. Okay, guys? And of course, we can follow the progression of this to Egypt. And I'm including this because I've already shown you this image in this series, guys. But these markings on these jade bars from China are the earliest recordings of the serac, guys. It's the name. It's the name tag. Okay, guys? In China, at the Liangzhu culture. Now this one, guys, this one, we can see the crescent and the dot, the ball, the orb entering the crescent, just like we've covered already now. We can actually find this actual serac in Egypt. We can literally find this person and his name badge. We can find his name badge in Egypt. The jade bar, guys, also we find them with cups in. Okay. We find worked jade axe heads, guys. And these are quite sharp. They're very usable. They say they're ceremonial, but I'm not convinced. In the Liangzhu culture, we start to find bronze, guys. We know that we had furnaces because we know that they had ceramic pottery, which we've just looked at. This leads to bronze, the working of bronze. And these bronze axe heads, they have interesting serpent and men and faces on them, guys. And this one, we can see the man, the squatting man, the stick man, stood flanked with these two animals, which I believe are lions, just like we see in the Sanxingdui Valley, guys. We also find jade faces with the design that I've just talked about. They're in this familiar shape of a very famous female in history, guys. Okay? We also find these W's, which is the crescent with the insert. The W's, guys. Got to check out the W. On here, on this example in the Liangzhu Museum, we can find the two with the insert again. We also find beads with multiple strings of beads and with colours in a certain order. I don't believe these are random, guys. I've included this because it's important. We see this throughout culture from here on in. And now again, as we progress, I can refer back to this. We also find bangles, guys. We find white jade bangles reminiscent of feathers. And we find Roboros gold bracelets, just like we find at Stonehenge. This one being the double-headed serpent, I believe, if we look close. This piece from the Liangzhu Museum, we can see the silhouette, the outside, is a mask. And we're continuing to learn how the symbology started to be used a lot because, again, this is a face, but inside the face is more detail. And this face, we can see the eyes and the nose and the mouth with the cheek teeth like a lion, guys. And he has in his head, he has the crown, and in his head, the bindi, the Buddha, the chakra. And he's flanked by these two characters, these two very interesting characters, guys, with the feathered headdress crown pouring out their vessels. And I've shown you this already, guys. In South American culture, I don't want to go forward, but look at the gate of the sun. Check this guy out. Of course, this flanked image between this, it's all the same stuff, guys. We find it right back to Sanliurfa. We find jade heads carved in the same sort of features as this bronze plaque. The big ears, the vampire teeth, the hat, the big earrings, the hooped earrings. I'm going to come back to this, guys. This is important. Amongst the white ivory, we find this sitting idol with the squarish face. Again, big ears, hooped, pierced ears, the little noggin on top. I believe this is the pineal. We will come back to this, guys. This is another very interesting artifact in the Liangzhu Museum. We find stone, carved stone, guys. This is an owl with a very interesting upside down face. Now if this doesn't scream vampires or Ahriman to you, Dracula, I don't know, guys. We find this carved stone head. We'll move on. We'll move on to Chimeo, guys. Chimeo is an interesting site. They're excavating Chimeo. It seems to have been a pyramid at one point. Plenty of sacrificial action going on at Chimeo, guys. We notice that there is 2 structures on the top of the mound with a processional walkway up to a courtyard and a gatehouse and a further causeway. Excuse me, guys. A causeway to the 2 tower pyramidal areas. Now, I don't want to spoil this series, guys, by going forward, but it's not a game, and I'm out to tell you the truth in a way that you can understand it. And I believe that this is the best way to understand, to show you guys. You remember the 2 towers from Catalhoyuk and the raptors, and they're leaving their dead and the living as sacrifices and offerings at the top of Catalhoyuk. And at the German culture, we found the tower with 2 columns, the tower platform where they put their dead for the birds of prey and scavengers to come, just like at Catalhoyuk. Well, this reminds me of what we see at Tenochtitlan, the pyramids, and the red and the blue, the 2 temples, the 2 structures, guys. The sacrificial pyramidal temples, guys. Just like we see at Chimeo, guys. And this, of course, mirrors the Giza Plateau. Can you see, guys? I certainly believe that this is the site of the world's first murder, where Cain slew his brother in cold-blooded murder, guys, okay? And after this, well, I'm not going to get mixed up in the story, guys, right now, but they immortalized this site, looking back, looking back, looking back, looking back. Okay, guys? Do you see? Chimeo is clearly a rebuilt, repurposed structure. We find these things protruding out. I can't get any images to see what they are because they're all covered up, wrapped up, taped up, guys, for protection. But Chimeo is clearly a megalithic polygonal site, and it is the megalithic polygonal blocks where we find the reliefs. The 2 heads we can find, this is the spirit and this is the man. The butterfly, guys, in China, we'll come across the butterfly in China. It is, of course, featured in the Wuhan military games of 2019, amongst many other things. We can see the megalithic polygonal blocks repurposed after a much later time, and then this has all been left, and now it's being discovered, and they can't work this stuff out, guys, because they don't account for the flood and the things that I'm trying to talk about here. We find all these symbols. We find this symbol of the man or the cross. There's layers, as I've told you before. flanked by faces. We find this interesting falling man coming down with the big ears and the arms with the earrings. We find this face, guys. This face might be familiar to you. This face is very, very interesting to me. Okay, guys, I will move forward to later times, to modern history. Now, at first glance, you might be thinking, what is this guy on with now? But if we look close at this image, we can see that this face has horns. He has eyes, which are covered by glasses. Serpent glasses, forming ouroboroses. He has this strange, straight type mouth. And he has this hooked, what they call the Jewish stereotypical hooked nose, guys. And we can see the definitive line down here. We can see the frowned brow, the V or the down arrow chevron, and he has the striped, feathered, the striped crown, guys. So if we look at this is actually Henry VIII's mask, helmet, mask, whatever. He was gifted this by Maximilian. Now, Maximilian, he was the Roman Holy Catholic Emperor, guys. He was privy to this information. We can see this head has the horns. We can see he has the eyes and the glasses. We can see the hooked nose. We can even see the features of the nose with the line and the triangles, guys. We can see this flat mouth. And we can see the stripes, right? Even down to the lines in the V of the down chevron with the insert, guys, because Maximilian, he knew, probably been to Chimeo. He was certainly privy, as in Egypt, as it is in the Orient. And this never went away. Okay, guys? At Chimeo, we find serpents. We find them on their own. We find these twin serpents. Very interesting. I believe something to do with sperm. But they look very interesting, guys. Very phallic in nature. We also find this stamp, guys, at Chimeo. The second finding of a seal. Remember the earliest seal? The seal of the Order of the Dragon we found at Catalhoyuk. Well, here, guys, we find the man flanked by the lions at Chimeo in a seal, guys. And I'd just like to point out, guys, that I left this image out of the Navalikori part of the series. We find this image at Navalikori, guys, but instead of a man flanked by lions, he's flanked by the clay men, the pot men, the Hanu men, the Hume men, and he is the turtle. Okay, guys? So in this Navalikori image, he is the turtle flanked by the Hume men. The Sanlia for relief, Catalhoyuk relief, and now the China axe and seal. Okay, guys? This is Chimeo in China. At Chimeo, they find this, which some say is an altar, some say is an idol. I've got my own theory on what this is, guys, and I'm going to tell you about it in just one moment. In this block behind in the background, we can see, interestingly, the two crescent shapes with the orbs coming together and the round Arton-like solar disc soul with the face, guys. So here we have the two and the face, which is the spirit that possesses. I'm sure by now you don't need me to explain, guys. Here is the three. Chimeo, guys, we find these heads, skulls. We find them with these holes bored in, the bored holes into the skulls, just like we find all over the world, starting at Göbekli Tepe. Now, this was done, it must have been done while this person was alive, guys, because you can see it started healing. In China, not so much healing, but guys, in Chimeo and Göbekli Tepe, we find skulls from the skull cult with the same holes, guys. We move on to the Yinzu Museum in China. The Yinzu Museum itself, we see the Triskelon, the triple entrance aspect, and the Ouroboros, which we can see. The jade bar with the slit is the Ouroboros, guys. Here it is as dragon heads. And the central gate. Okay, guys. Here at Yinzu, we start to find really intricate burials with plenty of bronze and offerings and bones and all sorts of stuff, guys. I'd like you to take note of this stone bird thing, the style, and this, how it comes round at the back. Guys, this is the Horus, the Garuda, the Quetzalcoatl. We find these in the National Museum of Anthropology, guys. I've already shown you this before, so I don't mind just dropping that bit of information in here. We find the square container, just like at Catalhoyuk and the Jomon culture. We find a chest and these things. I'm going to cover these in a minute, guys. Yinzu burials of important people. At Yinzu, we find more sacrifice pits, guys. And we also find offering pits. In the offering pits, we find these plates, these offering plates. They're marked and they have forms of writing. And this one, you can see they've drawn a face, made a face with the markings. This comes down, you can see, of course, guys, they are turtle skulls. Turtle shells, sorry. In the Wuhan video, we can see the male and the female receiving the fire and their child, and they pass their child through their fire, represented by this offering plate, the shape of a face with big ears. We can see on it the horned head and the china hat with the bit coming off, which is the horned head is the bird head, the beaked bird head. You see it, guys? Okay, this from the Vinca culture, if you remember, I said this was important and to remember it. We find this at the Vinca culture, guys. The bird man, the horned man. Okay, guys. At the Yinzu Museum, we find outside the Ankh, okay, in Chinese style. We have the Ankh, who is the vessel of the anti-messiah, under his arch, complete with his keystone. Okay, guys? Outside the Yinzu Museum. Inside the Yinzu Museum, we find architects of agriculture. Sorry, guys, I am overwhelmed, guys, with all this stuff, as I hope you can sympathise and imagine. Agriculture and transport, the wheel. We find lots of this stuff, guys. Now, in the Yinzu Museum, we find this bronze chariot pulled by the birds. Can you remember the Vinca chariot, guys? The Vinca chariot pulled by the ducks. Do you see, guys? Now, I don't know how historians are getting away with this, guys. I really don't. We find more turtles inscribed. These are offerings, guys. We find all sorts of stuff, markings. We find this man, and this man on his knees with his arms in the air, with the orb. Okay, guys? We find the mark, the cross. We find all sorts, guys. Now this, they are turtle shells, these offering plates. And it is a turtle helmet, guys. In the Yinzu Museum, we find this samurai looking turtle helmet, complete with the V, the horns. Okay guys, the turtle helmet from China back to Turkey. I believe this is amazing stuff, guys. You just couldn't make this up. We also find in the Yinzu Museum this bronze helmet of the brow. This is an Anunnaki helmet, guys, but it's not. It's China. It's Yinzu. We see the crescent with the insert, the point, the early artifact, just all so much, guys, so much stuff. I can't even begin to do a deep dive into all this stuff right now. There's so much to cover, so much I've not included. Check this helmet out, guys. The turtle shelled samurai helmet and the bronze helmet, guys, from Karahan to Catalhoyuk Catholic to Yinzu. At Yinzu, we find in the museum Kongs of a man wearing the turtle helm, guys. And we also find Kongs with green gemmed eyes. If you remember back to the idol from the Mahdi culture, the Giza Plateau, he's made of the same yellow jade and he has the same green eyes. Guys, all we need is to stick some red hair in here and this picture's starting to become pretty clear. Red hair and green eyes, blonde hair and blue eyes. And anyway, the plastered skulls, guys, we find in the Yinzu Museum, we find a skull covered in jade, plastered with jade, guys, okay, in a mosaic pattern, which will become again very, very familiar if it isn't already. We follow this plastered skull again from the earliest Egyptian Giza Plateau culture to Catalhoyuk through the Levant. Now we ended up in the Liangzhu Museum in China. This is of course the origins of the Day of the Dead and all that stuff. And silly me, even I, before I was aware, here's a tattoo I have of this. It is all the same stuff, guys. And we are now unraveling the journey taken, how this stuff spread. The plastered skull in the Yinzu Museum, the jade mosaics. Wow. We find in the Yinzu Museum this falcon-headed jar, which I believe is the start of canopic jars. And this is of course the falcon, the Horus. Come back to this jar, guys. We find lots of sex, phallic related objects in the Yinzu Museum. We also find this face, which was a big deal. It's now been returned. It was on BBC. This just reminds me of the face from Nivalikori, Morph and his friend. We move on to the Hongshan Museum, guys. The Hongshan is littered with jade or nephrite artifacts. Find this kneeling entity with the ribbed head gear. We find this weird looking creature. This has evolved it now into 4 things on his head. I'll just describe it, guys. I'm sorry, this is not quite as good, this video. But the goods, we are giving the goods, guys. We find this jade ruler, okay? Measuring sticks in the Hongshan Museum. We find all sorts of idols We find squatting ones. We find this, which has all the epaulets and the one eye, the apron, the chevrons, the regalia. We find this, guys, this featureless face, which we've seen before in the Vinca culture, and now we find in the Hongshan Museum. And we find these monkey men, again, with progressive from the ribbed to now becoming the top hat, guys. Okay. We see this guy with the horns. We also find plenty of these really pointed dunce cap, Anunnaki, chevron type idols wearing these hats with the extremely large ears. It's just, I just can't keep saying these words over and over again, guys. It is all the same stuff. It's all the same story, and we are following it. We find the grey clay idols, and in the Hongshan Museum there's workshops where you can make yourself a grey clay idol. No, thank you. The white jade idols that we find in the Hongshan Museum are very interesting. Here we find a lion man with his arms raised in the familiar position. We also find this artifact, which is strikingly familiar now at this point. It is the Birdman, the Horus, the winged disc. We can see it is flanked by two creatures, and it was found along with this seal. We see the winged disc in this artifact. We see the elements, guys, of the star and the circumpunct. We also see it is flanked just like the Master of Animals. And this is a seal, guys. It is the same stuff. Like I've just told you, I can't keep using the same words, but I have no choice. It is all the same stuff. The seal, the flag, it is all the same, guys, okay? We also find in the white jade this Sphinx idol. And this Sphinx has a pig nose, a boar nose. This is the Sphinx, guys. And we see these Sphinx carved of wood with the unicorn horn, the little horn, in the Hongshan Museum, guys. We see it has on it the spiral, which is the serpent. We see another spiral serpent down here, guys, okay? We also find in the white jade the face of the Kong, the big-eared man with the earrings, with the turtle helm. Okay, guys, I know this is becoming monotone, and a bit repetitive what I'm saying, but I have no choice. I'm trying to show you the artifacts, guys, okay? We find in the white jade turtles. We also find this pig, boar, okay guys? Now, in the last two videos, the two parts of this series, in the beginning and just after the beginning, I kept telling you how this is spiritual. The styles never go away. We can always find styles and compare them. This pig in the Hongshan Museum, guys, okay? And this is not a coincidence, guys, because across from it we find this bird, this falcon, this eagle. Okay guys, there is no coincidences. This is spiritual, this is supernatural, and the channel, the styles. Angry birds. We also find these jade bulls or cows and pigs. We find lots of sex objects, phallic and vaginal, in the Hongshan Museum, all made of jade. Now guys, this is really interesting. If you remember the twin animal throne, the twin-headed animal throne from the Vinca culture, we find in the Hongshan Museum and other places in China twin-headed thrones. We literally find a twin-headed lion throne, a twin-headed bull throne, and a twin-headed man throne. Okay guys? So without even going forward, just going back, we found this in the Vinca culture, and the guy who sat on it was the black and red man. We find these master of animals remnants, reminiscent jade lion figures. We also find these jade serpents, and some of these are dragon headed and some are lion headed. We find thousands of these jade serpents, guys. We also find the jade serpents with human heads. And again, I've been thinking for 3 days, guys, and I can't put my finger on it. It's on the tip of my tongue who this guy is in cartoon style. I know this seems a bit of a stretch, guys, but in Egypt, as it is in the Orient, the Masons are privy, the high-level Masons are privy to this information. Mystery School initiates are privy to this information, and if this is all true, as I believe, anybody who channels spirits can be privy to this information. Please leave in the comments, guys, if you know which cartoon character this is. In the white jade we find this bird man, who is the Horus, holding this mask. And if we look at this from the front, it will become the familiar man, with the man behind him with the hands on his front, holding him because he's possessing him, he's guiding him. The spiral, I'll show you this, guys, as we move on through the cultures. And here on the flat jades we can see this man is being possessed by this dragon serpent, and the serpent here to prove or to show just what we're talking about. The serpent in the forehead, this face, his actual face is very interesting, and down here we have the mark. Okay guys, so the jade mosaics spread, it is a common theme not only in China, but we will see this, some of you guys might recognize it already. This jade serpent with the lion or dragon head, the Fu dog, the mosaic, this is in the Hongshan Museum. The jade Ouroboros dragon, guys, this in the center, this, I've shown you this before. The style, the actual style of the head is important. I will come back to it if you can't remember where I've shown you this before. This one includes a knot, guys. This is tying together. We also find plenty of these jade artifacts in the Hongshan Museum, It is the spiral between the two lines. It is the circumpunct between the two pillars. Here we go, Freemasonry in Egypt as it is in the Orient. And we find these, which they say are pillars, guys. Excuse me. 2 artifacts in the Hongshan Museum I've included, but I'm not really going to fully commentate on right now. This on the left, this is very important because later when we start crossing seas and playing ball in courts, we'll start to talk about this and what it is and how the buy and, like I say, in the ball courts, guys, without saying too much. It's not a game, I'm not hiding things, I just want to be synchronistic in the flow of this journey of the traveller, and where I can help it, I don't want to jump forward, I only want to refer back items and artifacts that we've already seen, like things in the Vinca culture or the Madi culture of Giza. So in the Hongshan Museum, we find this, which is later China, but still in China, and a progression of the beliefs. We see the emperor on the throne, and the throne is flanked by these 2 serpent dragon heads. And at the bottom we see the 2 lions, and the lions in China are the Fu dogs. So this guy, this dark oriental, black-faced oriental guy with the long wispy beard, is sat on the dragon throne, flanked by the Fu dogs. And on his head we can see the bird serpent, okay guys, and on his chest we have the lion motif, and here we can see the crescent and the lion coming down into the crescent. It is all the same stuff, it is one story, and we have followed this now from Neanderthal Lascaux in France all the way across the globe to the Giza Plateau and the Madi culture, up through the Levant to back to the Sanliurfa Valley. We've followed it to the Vinca culture, how it spread from the Vinca culture, it spread across the world in the Neolithic age, and here we are in China, guys, establishing the first empire of the world. These jade artifacts in the Hongshan Museum, we can see the Bai ring disc, which is a circumpunct, and in the center is the dragon, and it is flanked by these 2, which I believe, guys, are not the phoenix. Well, we'll say phoenix. I'll remember the proper word for this real animal in a moment. We can see this instance, the circumpunct by disc, flanked by the 2 dragons, guys, okay? 2 sticks, 2 towers, the orb in the middle, the master of animals. We can see now how symbology is not only layered, guys, but it starts becoming interchangeable. Now this is very interesting. In the Hongshan Museum we find these flat bronzes, which is the Ankh, but it is the man. And it is the man with the halo, right guys, and the extended floppy arms that are really dragons, and in his head is the insert and the master of animals. But these 2 guys look to be doing some form of martial arts, and they are highly demonic. There's loads to this, guys. Can you see what I'm pointing out? We'll swiftly move on. In the Hongshan Museum, we find these trees, guys. The tree of knowledge. They say it's the tree of life. They only count 1 tree, as I've told you before, but there were 2 trees. Theirs is the knowledge tree. They say there's a 1 tree because they've replaced the Lonely Palm Mall, the Freedom Tower. That is the bad guy. And here is the bird sat in the top. There's plenty to look at these. Go and check all this stuff out on your own, guys. Also in the Hongshan Museum, we find these, which they call jade locks. And this one we can see it is the U, the omega. We can see it is the crescent with the insert, and the insert is the male aspect. We can see in these locks, guys, that this is the bag. The lock, the jade lock, guys, is the bag, and it comes from China. Alright, guys? We find blades, progress from flint knapping to polishing and sharpening jade. This one's very interesting. Reminds me, without jumping forward too much, Molyneux. Now this carved stone throne of the animal head, the lion, puma with his tongue out. I've shown you one of these guys before, literally in a pyramid, and so has NEXT. He claimed to be giving you never before information. He just showed it you. He didn't tell you anything about it. Well, here is one in the Hongshan Museum in China. In the Hongshan Museum in China, we also find this serpent, which this harkens back to the tepe, guys. There's no two bones about it. At this point, if you're following and you don't agree in the spiritual, supernatural stuff, that's okay. At this point, you cannot deny the physical journey and the spread of the beliefs. At this point, guys, I find that hard to believe if you're not following and in agreement in some way, guys, of the physical artifacts. We also find, that being said, jade hands. Okay, all I can say about this is wow, jade hands. Now guys, I showed you the Angry Birds and I said about the styles, and I keep saying it. Here are some more artifacts in the Hongshan Museum. Can you tell me the styles? What you see, guys, right here. Of course that's what you was going to say. And it sounds crazy to say it out loud. But as it is in the Orient, because this is the root of everything. And they put it in all the stuff because for some reason, which we will cover later, which some of you already know, they need you to have all this stuff in your head today. They need your head to be full of all this imagery. They never tell you why, and they never will, as it is in the Orient. In the Hongshan Museum, we find these jade vessels, which again harken back to what we saw in the Vinca culture. And this is important because of the progression, which we'll get to in a minute. The vessel on this stand, what that means. But we find what we see in the Hongshan culture, we've already seen it in the Vinca culture. The Hongshan pottery, we can see this, whatever he is, with a pig nose, pig man, with his eyes looking up. We see this chalice, vessel, the omega, the crescent. We see it with the web inside it, the mesh, the net, and we also see the X. The X marks the spot, the mark, guys. Just to show this is no coincidence, if you remember the Vinca culture, the squatting lizard man, all three aspects combined. The lizard man, which I showed you also features on my drawers, on my landing upstairs, we find on the pots in China, guys, in the Hongshan Museum. We find lots of them. We can see the mark in his head and the dots. We find pottery with, literally, the Ouroboros. And we find pottery with the bird, fish, and the axe with the X, the axe man. The axe man cometh, X marks the spot. It's all the same stuff, guys. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me say that, but it is. What more can I say at this point? Now we find the bronze vessels, the bronze with the spikes. The spiked jars, guys, the spiked vessels, cups, beakers. If you remember, we found these in the Vinca culture, and I showed you how they progressed and spread across the world. Here's the Stonehenge bowl, the spiked bowl, guys. Well, here is the bronze in China. We also find drinking horns. And I said I'd come back to the bird vessels, which I thought was a proto-Coptic canopic jar. We find these owls. Right, guys, the head is the lid and the lid comes off. Now, I didn't realise until I saw these owl vessel jars with the spiral and the head, which is the lid, which comes off. I didn't realise that these are also from the Vinca culture, and the Vinca owl head is the jar lid. There's jars missing, guys. It's the lid. It's the same thing as the Vinca owl head jar lid in the Hongshan Museum in China. And today they've got this little exhibit, this face, the Joker, the Styles, the Laughing Man. Go watch some videos, guys, about experiences on DMT, ayahuasca, the toad, peyote, mushroom, psychobin. Go and it's all the same stuff, guys. So we move on now to Sanxingdui. This is one of my favourite sites in the whole world. Sanxingdui in China, in the Sichuan province. Gotta get some of that Sichuan sauce, guys. In Sichuan, we find these sacrificial and ritualistic offering pits. We find them full of elephant tusks. Now the ivory is in China where it starts to become sacred because it harkens back to the mammoth tusks, but the mammoths are gone. All we can find to replace is the elephants. So we find these pits full of the elephant tusks, the ivory, guys. And amongst the ivory, we find all manner of bronze artifacts, which we're about to take a look at. The most important to me of all, the most important artifact, guys, in the whole world, in the entire historic record, I believe, and I know how big of a statement that is, guys, is this, found recently in the Sanxingdui offering pits. We've took some screens from a Chinese news video. I'd like to read the captions. This artifact is the first of its kind ever found at this site. That goes for the world, guys. This artifact here is the first of its kind ever found in the entire world, in the entire historical record. We read that the upper part is a trumpet-shaped zun. It is an ancient wine vessel. Okay, guys? And the lower part is an urn-shaped li. So here we have the zun li. Okay? This is what it is. It's this artifact. The zun li is the two vessels. It's an ancient wine vessel on a squared pedestal. Okay, guys? So it's a square pedestal with a round-shaped li urn topped by a new wine vessel, the zun. The middle part of the upside-down figure is a human head and a snake body, just like from Karahan and the serpent snake man artifact that we've just seen in the Hongshan Museum. The middle part is an upside-down figure of a human head and a snake body, the fallen squatter man spirit coming in to the new wine vessel that is the recycled old wine vessel, because they have squared the circle, guys. Here is a picture, close-up picture of the face on this extremely important and rare artifact. Here is a picture of it in the offering pit as it was found in situ. We can see that it is a man. It is a man with his hands coming around the front, and on his head is a vessel with the face on it, guys. We can see this serpent snake-like feature, what they're talking about. At the top, it's flanked with an eagle. This is where the wind, the spirit comes in, guys, okay? Just like the sax, the saxophone, or the saxohuman, okay, guys? The wind comes in, this artifact, the serpent, into the man, the vessel. Okay, guys? Here it is in the museum, being cleaned up on its side. A full picture now. We can see this back bit, the sax. Okay, guys, so this is why it is so profound and the most important artifact in the world, because it is a real, live, actual Khumb artifact. Okay, guys, it is a Khumb. The Khumb, guys, as I understand it now, is the whole story of the sacrifice and the death and the rebirth of a god and the genetic match host possessed by the spirit. The Kum is the whole thing in one image, guys. Okay? And if you know about Tiki, the Tiki mask, you see this, I've used this, although I don't want to jump forward, I've used this so that I can show you this face, the two eyes and the nose and the mouth. In the Kumb is this guy on the Sanxingdui sacks, wine vessel, the Liangzhu. It's the same stuff, guys, it's the Kumb, okay? This heart is the vessel which we can find on its own with the man with the elephant nose with another man in his head, in his heart. We find thousands of these vases, and we can see from different ones that the nose is the elephant trunk. And this is important because, again, when we get to the next couple of cultures, we will see this. This is what I believe, my opinion of the Chimeo altar is. It is the central part of the Kumb, guys. It is the vessel. And this is why these Ming vases have become so important, iconic, and so expensive, so sought after by royalty. And it's where we get the urn. They're keeping you in the urn, the ashes, instead of putting you in the hole in the ground where you belong. Just like in the beginning, the hole in the ground, well, we've scrapped that. We're now burning you, passing you through the fire and putting you in the urn, which is the bottom of the Kumb. It's the first step of the death and resurrection of a god. On the side of this vase, we can see the man with the horns of the serpent. It's the same stuff, guys. There's no getting away from it. The Sanxingdui artifacts are linked to this story of the traveller, the world's first murderer. In the Sanxingdui Museum, we can find this birdman figure, which they call the Garuda. So in the Sanxingdui Museum, they actually say this is the Garuda. And I say the Garuda is the Horus. And not only is the Garuda the Horus, he is also the Quetzalcoatl. He is the bird serpent, the feathered serpent man, the house bird, house serpent, possessed by the Arten, the house hand and house rib, possessed by the spirit of Baal. And on this Garuda, we can see the wind coming in from the back, the breath in the sacs, and we can see it portrayed out the front in the serpent or the osset. We can see the circumpunct on his chest. It's all the same stuff, guys. It's the same story because there's one story and it is the true story. The only true story. In the Sanxingdui Museum, we can find these familiar now angry bird, falcon heads. We find the full bird idols, guys. It's the Horus, who they say, admittedly, is the Garuda. We find these giant bronze masks of this guy. Now, if you remember back to I think it's the Hemdu Museum, we found some ivory idols of a man sitting, and I asked you to remember his face. Well, this is the face, okay, guys? We find this different aspects with the osset and this one with this weird stuff coming out of his eyes. We'll try and cover this later, guys. I can't begin to explain with just this image what this is. I don't think many will get it. Moving on to the Sanxingdui site, we find the heads, and on the back of the heads, we find the plait, the braid, the ponytail, the oriental ponytail, and we see that this guy is wearing not only a mask, but a horned turtle helmet, and he has the ponytail. This is of course Jet Li. This is all the same stuff, guys. We see this at Navali Kori right? Because it is possession of the Kundalini, the spirit, the serpent energy possessing in the pineal, the insert in the crescent. Can you see it, guys? Gently. We also find these idols with extremely windy, wavy arms. The styles, okay, guys? Beetlejuice, it's showtime. We find them holding giant ivory and elephant tusks. In Sanxingdui, we find this massive bronze tree. They say it's 5,000 years old, guys, which would put us before the flood in the antediluvian age. We see it. It is in the museum. They've conveniently placed a sun disk and the sun solar circumpunct above the tree. We can see the light makes the ray, just like we see at Tepe and other places what people use for the Enlightenment. We see this tree has trinkets all on it. It has the spiral and a dragon. It's covered in stuff, guys. What I would like you to notice more than anything is this hand and this rib on this tree, this bronze tree in the Sanxingdui Museum. On the dragon, we see the spiral. Okay, guys? And on the hand, we see the triskelon, the triple spiral, because it is the two genetic hand and rib possessed by the spirit, guys. Okay? We can see this all over, and I'm using this because it's the best place to show it. The hand and rib is the Horus, and these fingers going off like the wings. We see the mark, guys. Amazingly, the hand and the rib on the tree in the Sanxingdui bronze. More bronze, guys. We see this little bird. This, again, is a style we see in cartoons. I can't put my finger on it right now, but we do. Sanxingdui, we find what they call the turtle bronze backpack. Okay, guys? So this, if you know Otzi and his backpack, and compare that to this bronze one, this turtle shell, we find this turtle shell backpack. We also find the wheel, guys. Bronze wheel, 5,000 years old. Sanxingdui. And we find lots of this big-eared man with this mask. Because the face, the weird... I'm sorry about the quality of this image. But this weird face is the mask and not the bearer. The serpent, okay, guys, with the big ears, the Garuda. We find plenty of dragons stood behind birds, just like the men stood behind the other men. We find not only dragons, but we find unicorns, guys. In China, in Sanxingdui, we find bronze unicorns. And again, this mask, if you remember back to the jade mask, we find this mask. I will use it later when we get to the place where we're going to show you. I will refer back to this. We find these vessels full of bulls and aurochs, and we find this one with dragons and bull aurochs. It's all the same stuff. We find three-legged cauldrons, which again, guys, as we progress through culture, I will refer back to the three-legged cauldrons. And we find the square container in the Sanxingdui Museum. We see this familiar looking face with the big ears, and we see that he is the scorpion. He is the scorpion king, guys. The guy with the big tabs. We also find this bronze, which is the fish, which is Dagon. So Dagon comes from Sanxingdui site in China, and we can see that in the Catalhoyuk Vaticano, they're still wearing the Dagon mitre hat. It's all the same stuff. Cain hailed from China. We find this knobbly weapon, which reminds me of the Nobbled Club. We find this exquisite blade, jade, with the Sanxingdui mask as its pommel. Couple of other interesting Chinese artifacts, guys. There's this three-faced head looking kind of Olmecs looking, really, guys, to me. We'll get there soon. Can we see this? Well, I don't even know how to describe this beast. This beast with his tongue out and his third eye chakra, with the Hathor ears, the lion, and the sun mane, the cheek teeth like a lion, the dragon moustache. It's just an amalgamation, an abomination, this beast in China. We see this in the Sanxingdui Museum, which I'd like to include. There's familiar aspects in here, guys. I'll refer back to this as well. Now, of course, I'd just like to add, in China, across China, we find massive megalithic pyramids. We find step pyramids, guys. We find lots of pyramids all over China. We find megalithic ruins. We find this, the tomb of Lady Di. If we have a look at the tomb of Lady Di, we'll find that she was buried in a sarcophagus within a sarcophagus within a sarcophagus. She was buried in pomp and ceremony, highly decorated, and with lots and lots of possessions, guys. And this is not Egypt, this is China. This is the tomb of Lady Di. The tomb of Lady Di contained this T-shaped banner, and as we look, we can start to decode familiar Masonic symbology. The three, the crescent, the sun, the black sun, and flank all of it, guys. We can see familiar Masonic symbology on the T-shaped banner from the tomb of Lady Di in China. Lady Di, okay? We also find these burial suits of jade, mosaic jade burial suits, guys, which again I'll refer back to. And of course, what China video wouldn't be complete without the terracotta army? I'd like to jog your memories to the terracotta army that we saw in the Vinca burials, guys. The Vinca terracotta army and the China terracotta army. An interesting site, megalithic site, covered by Vlad 9VT. This guy has an awesome channel. You won't hear me saying anything negative about Vlad up to this point. Jinan. Okay, it's megalithic. It's got the symbols. Okay, the womb, the goat. All of it, guys. One of my favourite and interesting sites in China is the Dazu Grotto. The Dazu Grotto is intricately carved. There's hundreds of carvings in the Dazu caves. We see this guy with the staff of Hermes, and he has this X, just like we see Enki among other guys. The Dazu Grotto is certainly something I would suggest you guys check out. We see this guy, the male and female emperor and the queen, sat on the animal throne. The one-headed animal throne, may I add, and we see in the Dazu Grotto reliefs, we see the men making structures out of blocks, megalithic, huge megalithic blocks, and we see all sorts of nasty shenanigans going on with men with demonic faces doing horrible things to men. Pay attention to the Dazu carvings. We find some really interesting stuff, like this guy and what he's doing, and these guys over here, and this guy, this horse head or cow face, I forget. There's horse head and cow face guy. One of them running this through, piercing him in his side. I'd like to point out that this guy is tied to this post, this phallic post. This guy's tied to it, and he's been speared in his side. This post, tied to this post, this is important, guys. The Dazu caves, we can see, the Dazu Grotto release, we can see not only the men being tortured, but they're being ground up. The actual men are being ground up. We see his head and his face, they're being ground up. And the men, excuse me guys, the men are being placed in the blocks. Placed in the blocks as an ingredient. Sacks of humans. Sacks of humans in blocks. In wet poured blocks. Oh my goodness. Check out the Dazhu Grotto, guys. As with everything, to sneak this stuff in, we've been subconsciously unaware, absorbing all our lives, all this ancient stuff from China, guys. And most of us don't even know it. And the never-ending story. Atreyu, the nothing. The never-ending story. In the Dazhu Grotto, we see this, which has been which has been walled off, and now it's just an interior shrine. This relief of all these hands and Buddha reminds me of this, guys, at the Vatican stage. Instantly, it reminded me of this at the Vatican stage, guys. This is the Dazhu Grotto in China. Of course, the Yangshan quarries in China, the megalithic, strange. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Yangshan quarry. If not, check it out. We will return here in the next part of our video, which is the megalithic great builders. The Yangshan quarry, guys. Look at the size of this. Talk about the pregnant lady stone at Baalbek. Check out this stone in the Yangshan quarry. Obviously, there's other things in China to check out, guys. I would scratch the surface. There's plenty of carvings and statues, plenty of reliefs. All sorts, guys. Here's another one of my favourites. To say this is fairly modern, but still we see the Emperor with the demonic possessed face and the bindi spot. He has the square hat, he has the beard, he has the winged disc on his chest, guys, coming down into the crescent. And he's sat on the double-headed throne, guys. This is, of course, so familiar at this point. I've included these things because the architecture, guys, in China, okay, I'm going to put this out there right now. If you've looked at the Mayan architecture, compare it with this stuff, guys. Compare the Mayan architecture with this stuff, guys, okay? Ancient China and the ancient Chinese reliefs, megalithic blocks, exquisitely carved, guys. In this one, we can see this figure has the rod, weapon, and the ring. His forearms, okay guys, this is China, this is not Hindu yet. We see this weapon throughout the world, throughout history, this trident, this double-ended trident, okay guys, it is the epsilon. It is the two crescents and the rod. Okay, guys, that's what this weapon is. It is the epsilon. It is the motif from the tepe that Justin Welby bore on his chest at the funeral. We have the rod and the ring. Shen. Now, this Chinese image is very, very interesting because it shows all these faces in the war, like we've seen at Karahan Tepe, and like I've shown you at Pumapunka, and all of the places, guys. And the blocks carved intricately. The faces are just another brick in the wall. I included these statues because they claim that nobody knows the origin of these statues. They just found them out here in the field in China, which I find very interesting. Okay guys, the Shanhai Jin. This is the ancient religious text, the classic of mountains and rivers. It's very controversial, and some people say that it's irrelevant, nothing to do with Chinese culture. But if you calling Chinese culture that started from one of the 3 sons of Noah that came off the ark after the deluge, then probably the Shanghai Jin might be irrelevant. But the classic of mountains and rivers is very relative to the antediluvian world and the period in time that we're at right now, guys. I've shown you this silk before of the emperor man in the Ouroboros and the empress queen with the bird serpent. She is the mother of the bird serpent, who is the man in the Ouroboros. The story of Fuxi and Nuwa, who we can see here holding the square, literally guys, holding the square and compass, Fuxi and Nuwa. Which leads us on to the emperor's headdress. The headdress, the orb between these 2 shapes. You know it all now, guys. You know what this symbology is. You should be able to read the symbols, the flat, squared, and the beads in the front. So when the emperor has it on, he sees the beads. Okay, guys, the beads are the knowledge. This is the hat, the black cube of Saturn. It is the university hat. It is the tefillin. It is this, what they still use in China today. The D-Wave computer, and obviously the one, where the emperor, who is the one, he sees the matrix. He sees things for what they are because he is illuminated. He is alumni. He is an initiate. But the emperor obviously is the Horus, possessed by the actual spirit of the son of perdition. He was the one that will see things the most, and how he brought the knowledge with him wherever he went. The black cube of Saturn, guys, the D-Wave Q. This brings us on to the Tengu masks, which they say are Japanese, but from my findings, they have an origin in China, so I'm going to include them here. The Tengu is the mask with the big nose and the cube black item of knowledge, gnosis, strapped to his forehead. And we can see the Tengu coming down, pouring out his vessel with the gnosis and his big long conch. We can see he has horrible bird feet, demonic feet like Ishtar, and we can see he's winged. He is a fallen angel. The Tengu is fallen angel. I'd like to add in the China video the Tarim mummies, but of course these guys are after the flood. The way they were found out in the open, just like the Paracas mummies, red hair, just like the 18th dynasty, like our royal family today, and the Sutton Hoo burials. All of this, they're obviously haplogroup R1b, the ribs. Now one of the final slides, guys, a couple of images that I would include last. This relief from ancient China shows impaling. Did not originate with Vlad, but it did originate with the Vinca Wala Chi spirit, the Chi of Wala, okay? The impaler in China. And this one, guys, I've included this one. I would like you to remember this face. I'm going to refer back to it. This face is famous. I believe that this is the son of perdition. Really, guys, yes. I'm going to show how in another video. For now, I've included him in the China video, guys, and I'm asking you to remember. Okay. So, the ivory idol that I asked you to remember. He has the face looking a bit squared off because he has on the Sanxingdui mask. His hat with the little bobble, and he's sat on his missing jade lion throne. So in the museum with the sphinxes, okay guys, the little horn, we compare this idol to Khufu, and his headdress and the little bobble on top, guys. And we do some more digging. You can have a look into all of this yourself. We see here the cartouche, the Serek, what I showed you earlier in China, on the side of his throne. We find out through research that Khufu is Khufu. Khufu in China is the promised vessel of Bud. Here is Khufu and here is Khufu. Okay, guys, because this is Cain the traveller. He left Giza and he left somebody in charge and he left the structure and he left a system and it grew and he went on his travels in Nod and he ended up in China and he settled as the world's first emperor, Khufu, the golden vessel of Bud, the little horn, the unicorn, the sphinx. And then he returned to Egypt, to where he first slew his brother, to where it all began for him. He returned to Egypt as Khufu, and that is where he met the family, the one he left, Sneferu. It is highly contested that it is highly contested about Khufu being the son of Sneferu. It isn't, guys. I don't believe it is. I never have. Khufu left Sneferu in charge, and on his return, the pharaoh Sneferu hailed the returning traveller, Khufu. He hailed him as the real king, and he gave him his power and his seat and authority. Khufu, Khufu, the promised vessel of Bud. This, of course, if any of you are wondering, is the origin of Kung Fu and all the violent, hidden, disguised as self-defense, martial arts. He is the Karate Kid. He is the Crouching Tiger, containing the hidden dragon. Khufu is Kung Fu and Khufu, the tiger style from the Wuhan clan. Now, guys, you should be able by now, guys, to read and recognize the symbology. What all this, the Arten, the master of animals, flanked by animals, what tiger style is, the striped spotted lions, remember? Striped lions. Well, it's a tiger style. And the Wuhan clan got to check out the W, tiger style, flanked by the master of animals, with the Wu in his crown chakra. The Knossos traveller, the wanderer, the first murderer. They call him Cain. And I believe that this depiction is really him. And I said it. I really believe that this depicts Cain, who is Khufu, who was Khufu, who was carrying the Walla Chi, the spirit of Walla, the world's first murderer, the first son of perdition, the half-blood prince, the marked, half-hand, half-rib, possessed by the spirit of Baal. They call him Cain, Khan, Quinn. And may Yeshua bless us all.